you're not going to expect the society to produce,
Not gonna be
semiconductors
the next
or
ASML
design
2.0 there. Yeah.
design chips like KLA Corp or similar, right? That's not what you're going to this economy for. What they have though, they have agricultural resources, where the U.S. and U.S. as well as an agricultural producer can now engage with Argentina, which is China's number one supplier of soybeans. And you look at its beef production, a lot of agricultural commodities. Now, instead of the U.S. agricultural sector and the Argentina agricultural sector being used to play against each other as competitors, these two cooperating now, teaming up, can kind of solidify their own agricultural export markets, right? So it's a key Achilles heel for the U.S. So there's that. You've also got some shale resources, energy development resources. And then you've got metals and mining and the kind of the Patagonia, the Andes Mountains, all of that. And obviously, what the U.S. needs, it's with all of these tariffs being applied, the one Achilles heel, what can't the U.S. economy produce, or what do they not have that it most definitely needs for its kind of modern advanced economy to keep humming along? Needs rare earths, right? It needs the minerals, right? And Argentina can be a source of some of those, like through South American development. So essentially, the U.S. is picking up a proxy state. So really, like Argentina was like in the old world, 1500s, 1600s, it was Spanish occupied, right? Still, like as is the rest of Latin America, has those Spanish roots. With the U.S. coming in on this deal, and there is a kind of an Anglo-Dutch kind of back end as well that you can kind of see fuzzily. You're picking up a new partner into the U.S.'s orbit with this deal. So it's really the same playbook as what you're seeing in equity capital markets in the U.S., but it's executed through the debt markets and derivatives in the kind of nation state context.
Got it. That makes more sense to me. And so then, from this perspective, I think Japan makes a lot more sense to me as well. Then I know the new Japanese PM. I'm gonna flip over that slide for you here. Japan's first female prime minister, but I've also read that very, she has very close ties or very friendly with maybe some of the ideals that Trump is trying to push for. So I'm kind of curious here. We've already been a close partner with Japan over the past, since the end of World War II. So I'm very curious. Why is this even more of a big deal that she's come to power and Trump's actually reaching out and congratulating her?
Yep. So Japan, just for historical context, we're not to go deep history, but I'll just go back to 1955. They've had basically single party rule. So they've had a dominant governing structure and hierarchy. It's only really shown bits of weaknesses on two prior occasions in recent history. One was like 1992, 93, and that was coming out of the collapse of the Japanese bubble. We saw the Nikkei bubble collapse, the Japanese real estate bubble collapse, all of that. Then you got the 2008 bubble collapse. So it went through, a challenge to its kind of hegemony within Japanese internal politics and government right after the 2008 global financial crisis. And then you're also seeing another episode right now with what we just witnessed with the election of their new PM. So the new PM, Takaichi, she's from the LDP, so she's from the classic stalwarts. But what I'm reading is it looks like she's going to have to bring in kind of partners within her cabinet to form a governing coalition. So you see the hold of the post 1955 kind of implementation of the broader global order, like within Japan, which sits inside of this global system. You see that itself starting to go through challenges on, now we're looking at three separate episodes, right? Both each of them like 10 to 20 years, like decades, they sit decades apart. But you're seeing that hold, that stability gradually weaken, right? So that's what we're working towards. Um, these things eventually fall apart, give them enough time, but they can also hold together for a very long time, bend but don't break until they do. Um, so in terms of this Japanese PM, she's going to have to bring in some outsiders from the LDP to hold its coalition, similar to what we've been seeing in other countries like G7 politics and in France, Germany, etc. The old coalitions can't hold. They have to kind of broaden the base and fight off the factions that they don't want to win. Choose the right or the left, and then try to hold the center. And eventually, you get into a position where the status quo can't last, and things snap very quickly. Is how they tend to work out. But Takaichi's kind of politics. I'm just reading here. Um, She supports revising Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution, which renounces the use of military force. She supports strengthening the US Japan alliance, so she's pro US. Um, she's considered pro Taiwan and a China hawk. Um, that's just reading from her Wikipedia page, first section. So you kind of see like, who she would be in support of. She's clearly um, among the faction in Japan that supports working with US, um, and taking a hawkish posture against China. So that's kind of what you're looking at, and that's why you look at Trump's reaction to this. Tremendous news. I think that tells you everything you need to know.
Right.
And given what they're looking at in debt markets, don't see, and in the Japanese debt markets, we saw massive activity in the yen. I think like Monday on or Sunday night in the U.S., but Monday's market open. Tokyo's the first one to see sunlight, so they open up trading every week. The yen, and this result of Takaichi was made on Saturday evening in the U.S. our time. So when their markets opened Friday night, yen weakened by 4.5% against the dollar. No, sorry, I would say about 1.5% against the dollar. The Nikkei in Japanese yen terms spiked, is up 4.5%, and that's just a response to her kind of what the market sees as her policy agenda, which is going to be keep front end rates low, let long bond yields slowly rise. But this was the way the market kind of reacted to that: a sell off in the yen, steepening, a bear steepener in the Japanese government bond market, and a spike in Japanese equities is how the market responded. So if there is further pressure on Japan's financial system, don't be surprised if you get a similar support deal from the U.S. and its institutions to backstop this friendly government in Japan.
Got it. And so then, in more surprising news, at least for me, this Israel-Hamas deal. I don't know if you're watching any clips of this, Matt, but there's a clip of, I think it's Pam Bondi speaking, and Trump is sitting next to her, and he gets passed a note from Marco Rubio. So, um, for me, this was not something that I specifically expected soon, right? I know that there's been a lot of conversation, and so I'm kind of curious from your perspective, Matt, how does this tie? How does this kind of jive with these other two, sovereigns that we were just talking about? And why did you place this in that same category?
Yeah. So Israel is, in my framework, Israel sits under the umbrella of this U.S.-led coalition. They're they're a partner, right? They don't need a financial bailout right now, like Argentina or the Japanese government bond market, all of that, the yen, that situation. But they are within the tent, right? So you've seen a shoring up, from Washington, D.C., of each of its, I don't want to, it's probably too far to call them satellite states. You could call them allies, but it's very clear which ally is the strongest relative to, the others inside the tent, and it's the US. It's also very clear with Trump coming in with the America First, like made it very well known, or very, he wasn't hesitant at all to say the quiet power part out loud. Like the U.S., that era of, um, Obama would describe as leading from behind. That's not the policy of this administration. So U.S. is going to lead from in front. So who's setting the agenda, pulling the orders, all of that. It's very clear what the White House's stance on that is. So Israel within that tent, part of this process, shoring up the stability of the Israeli state, which in this case means, working through a situation of war and violence, which is, sadly to say, the status quo of the existence of the um, Jewish settlement of Palestine dating back to, the late 1800s. From the whole existence, it's always been violent. Essentially, it's perpetually existed in a state of violence. I think today's announcement, the shoring up, the ceasefire, it really lines up with the theme of the U.S. injecting stability into each of its partners, like whether it's Argentina, Japan, Israel, you name it. The key allies behind the U.S. and its coalition, we've seen in this week's headline that same theme of, just injecting stability, right? And I don't expect this to be the end of the situation at all. In the broader scheme of human history, specifically talking about what's going on in Israel in our lifetimes, but it may be the end of a short-lived era, starting with October 7th of 2023, right? So I think those were like within the span of three countries, all of them massively important to the broader context of what's going on in markets. The nation state level negotiations, that'll primarily play out through foreign exchange and the dollar, which gives this administration the power and ability to move the dollar in terms of FX markets the direction it wants it to go.